Solitude, so often feared and misunderstood, is actually one of the greatest privileges life can offer. We live in a society that idolizes constant connection, where being alone is seen as a failure rather than a choice. But the truth is counterintuitive. Those who learn to embrace solitude discover a power that few dare to seek. It is in the absence of external noise that we find the most genuine answers to the questions we avoid asking. This is the space where autonomy is born and freedom flourishes. Contrary to modern conventions, it is not constant company that strengthens us, but rather the ability to walk on our own. Solitude is not a burden, but a powerful tool capable of transforming fear into confidence and doubt into clarity. More than that, it is the ground where emotional independence is cultivated, an essential skill for living fully in a world where dependence and the fear of being alone are the norm. While many see solitude as a punishment, it is actually an opportunity to reconnect with our inner selves. By stepping away from the distractions that numb our minds, we open space for self-discovery, creativity, and the construction of a life that truly reflects our deepest values. That is why those who learn to be masters of themselves do not merely endure solitude, they transform it into their greatest ally. You will discover why solitude is not a state to be feared, but a rare privilege. You will understand how it can be the key to a life of freedom and autonomy, something that few have the courage to pursue. The fear of solitude is one of the most universal and, at the same time, most underestimated human experiences. Despite all technological and social evolution, humanity remains trapped by a visceral fear: being alone. It is not difficult to understand why. Since ancient times, survival depended on the group, the tribe, and the community. This deep-rooted fear takes on new forms in modern times, where social media and digital connections promise to fill the void, but, ironically, often amplify it. It is almost comical, or tragic, depending on how you see it, that we have never been so connected and yet so alone. What few realize is that this fear, though uncomfortable, is also a silent teacher, always ready to teach lessons about personal autonomy and self-sufficiency. Behind this fear lies a truth that many avoid facing. Being alone means confronting who you truly are. There are no masks when there is no audience. This can be frightening. Imagine the silence of an empty house, the echo of your own thoughts, overwhelming the lack of distractions. Many people try to escape this at all costs, keeping themselves constantly busy or diving into relationships that serve more as crutches than genuine partnerships. Nietzsche, the philosopher who often questioned social conventions, pointed out that it is precisely in this encounter with solitude that one can discover a deeper sense of freedom. It is interesting how society encourages the fear of solitude as if it were an enemy to be avoided at all costs. Movies, music, advertisements all reinforce the idea that being alone is something sad, even shameful. But is that really the case? A closer look reveals that solitude is not the problem. The problem is the fear of it. By reshaping this narrative, we create space to see solitude as a fertile state, full of possibilities. Think, for example, of great inventions or artistic works. How many of them were born in isolation, in moments when the creator's mind was free from external distractions? A practical way to start overcoming the fear of solitude is to turn it into curiosity. If you are afraid of spending a weekend alone, try treating it as an opportunity. Do something you've always wanted to do but never had time for. Cook a complex recipe, organize that space you've been putting off, or even start reading an engaging book, like Thus Spoke Zarathustra by Nietzsche. It is not about filling time with activities, but about rediscovering the joy of your own company. And there is something even more intriguing. When you overcome the fear of solitude, you discover a new form of freedom. Without the constant weight of distraction or emotional dependence, it is possible to build healthier and more genuine relationships. Paradoxically, it is in solitude that we find the strength to be truly autonomous in our connections. This is the point where isolation ceases to be a prison and becomes a conscious choice. Being alone is like opening a door to a dark, unknown room where our internal shadows dwell, those parts of ourselves that we avoid recognizing. Fears, insecurities, repressed memories begin to take shape in the silence of isolation. For many, this perspective is terrifying, which is why the fear of solitude is so deeply ingrained in the human psyche. However, facing these shadows is not a punishment, but a golden opportunity to uncover who we truly are, free from external expectations. Solitude can be uncomfortable, especially at first, because that is when our inner demons appear. You know those little voices you silence with loud music or endless scrolling on your phone? In solitude, they become impossible to ignore. However, within this confrontation lies the potential for something greater. Nietzsche once said, "He who has a why can bear almost any how." And the why is often found only when we allow ourselves to face difficult questions. It is like cleaning a house that has been closed for too long. The process is chaotic, but the result is liberating. Overcoming the fear of solitude is not about becoming antisocial, but about learning to value relationships from a place of strength rather than need. Many people unknowingly build their identity based on how others see them. But what happens when no one is watching? Many fear solitude because it forces them to answer an unsettling question. Who am I without the validation of others? Though uncomfortable, this question is the first step toward understanding the difference between connection and emotional dependence. How many times have you heard someone say, "I don't know how to live without that person"? Though it may sound romantic, this phrase reveals a dangerous vulnerability. Depending on another person to validate our existence not only robs us of personal autonomy, but also makes us prisoners of circumstances. Nietzsche was always critical of social constraints and argued that freedom can only be achieved by those who are capable of walking alone, without getting lost in the desire to please or be accepted. Solitude, so feared by many, can be the fertile ground where creativity flourishes. In silence, without the external voices that so often shape our thoughts, our inner space expands, revealing ideas, insights, and possibilities that were once obscured. Many of the greatest works of art, literature, and philosophy were born in moments of deep solitude, not because these creators sought isolation, but because they understood that it is in emptiness that the internal world finds room to breathe. For anyone willing to explore this space, solitude ceases to be a state of lack and becomes one of abundance. What once felt like emptiness now overflows with possibilities. And through this process, a new realization emerges. Those who learn from solitude develop something rare and valuable, an unshakable confidence in themselves. Solitude is not a curse. It is a privilege for those who have the courage to embrace it. It is in this space that we truly become masters of ourselves, unlocking new creative, emotional, and spiritual dimensions. If there is one thing solitude teaches, it is that being at peace with yourself is one of the most powerful skills anyone can develop. When you no longer fear your own company, the external world loses its control over your emotions and choices. And in that space of freedom, life truly becomes your own.